I've had a request for more stories, so here's one more story that I have. Now, the reason I'm doing a story right now in the midst of my Corvette project is because I was recently involved in a boating accident, and I've got 3 ribs on this side, 7, 8, and 9 on my side, and rib 10 at my back, and ribs 9, 10, and 11 on the left side broken. So I've got 7 broken ribs. So I've dealt with quite a bit of pain lately, and I'm still not quite up to really lifting things. So there'll be a little bit of a break here. And I like telling my stories, so here we go. You're watching On the Mark with Mark. First, I want to apologize if you hear a lot of road noise in the background. There's a fairly busy highway a little ways from here, and sometimes that road noise comes through. The story I have is one of a World War II veteran, a guy that I met out at Kirkwood Community College. Back in the early 90s, I was taking some metalworking classes out there where you learn how to run a lathe and vertical boring mill and that, and it was on Saturday mornings. And what that was an open lab for the students out there, but anybody could come in at that time. You had to take a class to begin with, so you knew all the safety and how to operate the equipment without ruining it. But once you start going to this thing, you start seeing the same old timers out at that shop every Saturday. And this is a good bunch of guys. I started bringing donuts with me out there, so everybody knows the guy that brought the donuts, so that worked out well for me. There was one man, I'm going to call him my friend, even though I do not remember his name. He lived in Marion, Iowa. He was a World War II vet, and anytime I meet a veteran, if I have the opportunity, I always like to try to ask them, how was the war for you? And most of them really don't have too much to say, but this guy decided to share. But most of his story is about what happened after the war. So I would like to relay his story now. So I'm telling this World War II vet's story. It's not my story other than he told it to me. I'm pretty sure he has passed away by now. But anyway, all I know about him is that he was interested in metalworking and lived in Marion, Iowa. So here's what happened. His platoon, we got to start in World War II, got into a firefight, and one of their guys got shot up pretty bad, and he was shot up in the face. And by the time they got him bandaged up enough that they could move him, and with, you know how a head wound bleeds, and with the type of injuries he had, and the way that they bandaged it, he was functionally blind. You know, his face was covered, even though he still had both of his eyes and they were good. And what they needed to do, this guy was losing a lot of blood, was they needed to get him to the aid station. Well, the aid station was 15 miles away. So the sergeant asked for a volunteer to help him get to the aid station. And this man, my friend that I met out at Kirkwood, volunteered. And he helped this guy get to the aid station. Now, a person walks 4 miles an hour, so 15 miles, about 16 miles. You ought to be able to get there in 4 hours. No, it took them all day, almost till dusk, before they got to the aid station. And he said the guy could walk pretty good to start with, but pretty soon he's got his arm around his shoulder and he's pulling him along, and they kept having to stop and rest because the guy was so weak. And he said by the time they got there, he said he was practically carrying the guy. He just had no energy left in him. And when they got to the aid station, they took him away and could take care of him. And then my friend, he spent the night at the aid station, and then the next day he hooked back up with his platoon. I'm going to refer to these two as The soldier from Kirkwood that I met, he's my friend. And the guy that got wounded, he's the soldier. Okay? So they get through the war, and both of them live through it. And the soldier lives in Minnesota. And he wrote letters to my friend, and he said, you know, thanks for what you did for me. I would really like to show my appreciation. We've got really good fishing up here. If you'd like to come up and spend a weekend sometime, my family would really like to meet you. And my friend, he wrote him back and said, that's very generous, you know, maybe we'll do that sometime. Wrote him back that way. Well, the soldier kept writing letters to him, and every time he would say, please come to our farm, my family would like to meet you. And finally, after some period of time, he broke down and decided, you know what, I can do that. Let's do that. So they set up a date, and my friend, he didn't even own a car. He borrowed his dad's pickup, and he drove to Minnesota with his fishing pole to meet this soldier's family and to do some fishing. Well, when he got there and he came to pull into that farmyard, he said it looked like a carnival at this place. It wasn't just his family that wanted to meet him. It was the neighbors. It was the butcher. It was the teachers. It was the mailman. It was the cousins. Everybody within 5 miles of there had heard the stories that this soldier had told about my friend saving his life. So he pulls into the driveway, and he said there was old men were throwing horseshoes and kids were playing games, and they were roasting a pig. And he's driving up the driveway, and pretty soon people are looking and they see his Iowa license plate. And everything stopped. Everybody dropped what they were doing and came out and just swarmed around his truck. And he shut it off, and he got out, and he said everybody wanted to meet him. Men were slapping him on the back and shaking his hand. He said all the women wanted to hug him and kiss him, and they practically drug him up to the house in this little crowd of people up to the house. And then this is the part that gets me the most. The mother is working in the kitchen. She's been cooking all day, and now the guest of honor is here. And she dropped what she was doing. She came out of the house, and the crowd parted, and she came up to this guy, and I can quote this guy. This is exactly what he said to me. He said, she came up to me, she grabbed me, and she hugged me, and I didn't think she was ever gonna let me go. Unquote. Think of that mother. Here's the man who saved her boy's life. She could touch him and thank him and feed him. This guy, my friend, and I, we were standing in the machine shop at Kirkwood. Both of us had tears running down our faces. Very touching moment. Good on these Minnesotans. Man, I thought that was so incredible. He said the rest of the afternoon, he never wanted for anything. People were constantly bringing him plates of food. He always had a cold drink in his hand. The girls stayed nearby. He kept getting hugs and kisses all throughout the day. He spent the night, this was a Saturday night, at the farm. The next morning, he got up and he went to church with them, and he got recognized from the altar by the pastor there that we have this tremendous guest of honor here, and named him by name. And after church, everybody there wanted to meet him too. They did finally, at about noon, he said they made it out to the lake and did some fishing. They fished all afternoon, and the soldier was right. They had some good fishing up there. He caught a bunch of walleye. He said they came home and they had walleye for dinner that night. He stayed Sunday night, and Monday morning he had to get back. And when he went to his pickup truck, his pickup mysteriously had a full tank of gas, and the soldier's mother gave him one of those, is it a 1-pound coffee can? It was a coffee can with the plastic lid on it that had some sandwiches in it, had some potato chips in it, and a mason jar full of water was in there. So he had his lunch for going home because he had about a 6-hour drive to go home. And he pulled out of the driveway. He said he never went back there again, but I just thought that was such an incredible story. And oh my gosh, good on the people from Minnesota. I don't think this story should die, and I'm really glad that I get to post it here on YouTube because it'll have more legs now. And I really wish I knew this guy's name. I knew his first name at the time, but I don't have it now. But what a good name. Thanks for listening to my story. We'll try to get back to the Corvette as soon as I can. Thank you. Oh, and I asked him how the soldier looked after being injured so badly, and he said they put him back together pretty good. He said he looked pretty good. I mean, he had scars, but he looked pretty good. So I thought that was a pretty nice thing too, that he wasn't horribly scarred for life.